Hi everyone, it's Kojome here, and today I have something very interesting for you. A little bit of a different piece of content in between all the other stuff that I've been doing, gameplay and the card reviews. We're looking at a tier list. We're doing a sort of live reaction. Well, it's not live. It's a reaction. Let's put it that way. This is something that I came across today, something really cool. If you haven't checked out this YouTuber, you should. His name is BagelTCG. This is a pretty big YouTuber that normally does flesh and blood content, but he's been dipping into Altered recently. And today they uploaded a live stream VOD where they did a tier list for the entire hero pool of Beyond the Gates. Now, you know my standings on tier lists. I'll come back to that in a second. But this is very interesting content. Make sure to check out that VOD. And there is a massive discussion happening in the comments of that video where people are talking about the strengths and weaknesses of each hero and how they feel they're going to fit into the meta and everything. And it's fascinating. So do check that out. And I thought I would give you a little sort of my impressions on that. I don't want to staple any ratings onto this, but I have some thoughts on it. And people have been discussing it, so I thought I'd chime in. Before we dive in though, a little disclaimer because I'm about to disagree with a lot of the takes in this tier list. So first things first, this guy Bagel did a really nice job. I just want to make that clear. This is a very well thought out tier list. Many people are disagreeing with it, but that doesn't mean it's bad. This is not something that just some guy put together in 5 minutes and posted it online. This is a very well-founded debate. If you look at the video, this video is over 1 hour long, all right? He gives reasons for all of the points that he makes. It's all very well thought out and researched, and even though many people are disagreeing, it's a well-made piece of content is what I want to say. So that just as a little disclaimer at the start. I really appreciate this kind of thing, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of it. And another point, you know what I think about tier lists and Altered and generally ratings. I'm still of the opinion that we don't really need ratings for a game that's so early in its lifetime. But I do recognize that there are many people out there who want these kind of statements. You know, if you're a beginner looking into the game, you want to know what's good. You want to know what to look out for, what cards are valuable if you're opening boosters. These are all nice infos. What I just want to make sure is that there's not some sort of dogma developing. Right? So I like this kind of discussion. I like people weighing the pros and cons, and that's what I want to do. That's why I'm doing this video. I don't want to give you the truth. I don't want to claim that there's any truth. What I want is talking about the stuff, you know, playing the game. And that's why I want to also give you a sort of maybe a small rundown of all the stuff that I read in the comments of that video, all the stuff that I know from my other research, stuff in the Exalts League that's being played, stuff that I came across in my research of the colors when I'm doing the rating videos. I'm trying to condense that all into another one of these little pro and con arguments, and I think let's get into it. So here's the tier list. It's a bit blurred maybe. This is the result of this stream. So 1 hour of thinking went into this, and there's a lot of very interesting points here. I think I'll just go through the whole thing from the top and give you my 2 cents on each of these heroes and what I think about their placement. So let's start at the top. The top spot comes as no surprise to anyone, I think. Waru and Mac, I completely agree. This is, I think, unexpected to no one. The Waru and Mac deck, the Bureaucrats deck, that's what everyone wants to play. Robin Hood is the absolute all-star of the set right now, and it is very strong, yes. So I think nobody will seriously deny that Waru is one of the best decks, if not the best one. And if you look at what's actually being played competitively in places like the Exalts League or in tournaments, then Waru is, I think, the most popular deck and the strongest. Why is it so strong? I think that's not news to anyone either. The Bureaucrats all have effects that stacks the opponent out or that trigger when their expedition fails to move, and that's all very good with the asleep effect that Waru provides. I think there's also a point of individual cards being very strong, like Robin Hood is thought to be the strongest card of the set, and Robin Hood is actually a very interesting point to me because I agree that the deck is extremely strong, and I'm of the opinion 100% that this is the strongest you can play in Beyond the Gates, the Waru and Mac Bureaucrats. But personally, if you ask me, if you want my hot take, I think Robin Hood, the card, is overrated. You heard it here first, guys. Robin Hood is overrated. That's my take. Slightly overrated, at least, because, you know, from my background in Magic the Gathering, I know a couple couple of cards that do a very similar thing. Like one very famous sort of textbook example is Thalia, who's an infamous card that does a very similar thing. You know, it makes spells your opponents cast more expensive. And from that background, I have to say that yes, Robin Hood is very strong. It does something incredibly obnoxious, but it's not as much of an all-star as some of the cards that do the same thing in Magic the Gathering. So yes, of course, the altered card pool is very low powered right now because it's just one set. So Robin Hood kind of reigns supreme. And if you don't have removal for that, you're really looking at 1 or 2 rounds where you don't do anything, basically. But I feel like it could be a lot worse. And in the future, we might see cards that stacks that are worse. If you remove the Robin Hood, of course, your spell is more expensive, but you've gotten rid of the problem and there are no side effects. I think what makes Robin Hood so strong psychologically, or what the reason for why everybody is hating it so much, is because it has a disproportionately strong effect on your opponent in terms of mentality. Maybe not in terms of gameplay. That's my point. I'm not sure it's actually as strong as people make it out to be in the game, but it is strong in terms of a mentality effect on your opponent, because this stacking effect of your cards being more expensive, you notice that so strongly and so frequently. Like, it annoys you so much. And that's where I think that's the reason why everyone is so either so hyped about this card or hates it so much. So yeah, take that as you will, you know, roast me in the comments for it. I think Robin Hood is not the savior of this deck. The problem that, in my opinion, pushes Varro and Mac over the top into this broken tier, which I completely agree with, is that the rest of the deck, the entire rest of the Bureaucrat suit, is also very strong. There are so many other cards that are just as busted with Varro's hero power. Yes, Robin Hood is the highlight, but there's a lot of other stuff going on in that deck too. The other hero who's in this S tier here is Tasia, and this was a real surprise to me. When I looked through the comments, many people said that Tasia is definitely not S. Myself, you know, I'm just coming out of having played a lot of Tasia for my most recent video. Do check that out if you haven't already. And I agree that she is strong, yes, but she's not that strong. Surely she's not S tier. She's not to be mentioned in the same sentence as Waru. But what are the reasons for this placement? Basically, if you look at all the starter heroes, or let's put it this way, there is a certain group of heroes that are very similar, one for each faction, basically, that give you some sort of recurring power on the board. You know, Sigismar is the most simple one of that. 1/1/1 in power every turn. Kojo does basically the same thing. 2/2/2 in power every second turn, and the list goes on. Basira is another one. Tasia is another one, and Aphanos basically does that too. Tasia, in the case of Tasia, you get a buff of 1 power to the first character you play each turn. So that's 1/1/1 each turn, basically. But the argument that many people are fielding is that this 1/1/1 that you get is much stronger in the case of Tasia than it is in the case of other heroes like Sigismar, because you put it on an anchored character, and that anchored character stays in play for multiple rounds. So you're really getting multiple points of power per round. And that's true, but in my experience, that's not enough to push her over the top of, you know, being a good hero into the territory of being absolutely busted. It's a signature playstyle for Muna that is very on theme for her faction, but the anchored characters, the characters that can anchor themselves as they enter the battlefield, these are all balanced around having that ability. You know, they're balanced around the fact that you can boost them and they stay in play, and the whole system is sort of balanced around that. Whereas with Varro, you really don't feel like it's balanced at all. So yeah, I kind of agree with the comments on this one. Tasia probably not in S. If I had to decide, I would put her in maybe B. I think the Hydra deck is a lot of fun, as I said in the video. Whether it's actually strong remains to be seen. Muna has a lot of good removal. That's another good point for her, but I would say it's definitely not comparable to Varro. Now for the A tier, these are heroes that Bagel defined as very good, as in, you know, not just above average, actually very strong. These are the highlights. And we have Sigismar, Fen, Subhash, and Traced here. Sigismar is accurate, in my opinion. When the previous season started and we were looking at the starter decks and all the stuff that the factions have in their starter arsenal, the consensus was that Sigismar is probably the strongest one, because even though all these starter heroes give you 1/1/1 in power every turn, learn. For him, he has a very easy time exploiting this 1/1/1 recruit token that he gets. His Ordis playstyle is so built around having tokens on the board, buffing them, having them enter the battlefield buffed, and other things, that this one token ends up giving you a lot more value than just 1/1/1. People are still agreeing on this recruit being very strong, and Sigismar overall is such a solid hero. You can't really go wrong with that. Even if you don't go all in on the tokens, that 1/1/1 is still very strong, especially in the early game. It puts so much pressure on just one side without you having to do anything. So I would say yes, I would definitely have him in A tier as well. And I would say he's the strongest of all these heroes that give you 1 power each round in various different kinds of shapes. Now for Fen, yes, I think Fen was a bit of a sleeper pick. During the earlier parts of the previous season, people weren't really looking at her. I think in terms of Lyra, Nevenka being the starting hero got a lot of attention at the start, and Orak has a very flashy gameplay that took a bit of attention. But really Fen is, in my opinion and in the opinion of many others, definitely the most competitively viable of the three, because Lyra being so much about randomness makes the whole faction sort of structurally unsound when it comes to being competitively viable. Because if you want a competitive deck, if you really want to win, you want consistency, you want dependability. And stuff like Nevenka's hero power, where you roll a die and you don't know when you make that play what the result will be, that's poison to your game plan. And Fen is sort of, she's still random in the sense that what she takes away from you is your choice of what card you put into the mana. But that is very tame compared to the other ones. And the upside that she gives you is insane. You have so much draw, you have so much resource available to you. I think one of the best indications of how strong she is there was a big tournament played in Italy recently, pre-release tournament basically, with I think over 100 players. It was massive. And if I recall correctly, the final champion of that tournament was a Fen and Crowbar deck. I don't recall the games exactly or the matchups, but this is one of the decks that, besides the all-stars that everyone knows, like Traced, Waru, etc., Fen is another very strong hero. If you want to play Lyra competitively, Fen is the way to go, surely. So I completely agree with this placement. A for Fen is very good, but there is, and this is a point I want to make, there is a hidden weakness to her that people are not aware of. And if you play her for a while, you really find that out. The point is that her hero power triggers each round. So instead of drawing 2 cards, you draw only 1, you put 1 card from your deck into your mana, and then you resupply. But if you think about a normal game, at the start, that's basically what you would do. You would draw 2 and put 1 into the mana, but then at some point you want to stop. You want to stop putting cards into mana, right? Because you have enough and you want to play the cards so you don't run out of gas. But she can't stop. She will be putting cards into mana for the entire game. So that's something that not many people are aware of, and it's something to keep in mind when you play Fen. Your card draw engine is very strong, but you can't turn it off. It's a very interesting little sort of hidden detail about her hero power. Now, as for the other two in this A tier, Trace and Subhash, I definitely agree that Trace belongs in here. Actually, at the start, I thought that Trace probably belongs in S, but while he is extremely strong, it doesn't feel busted. When you play Traced, you're abusing strong cards like Copelia and Haven, but you're playing a deck. You have a fair share of resources, you play cheap spells, and you have counters against your deck. With Varu, that doesn't always feel that way. So I would say Waru in S, and that's the only hero that I will put into S. Trace definitely belongs in A, and I think it's position 2 in power after Waru, so I would put him at the start of this A tier. But as for Subhash, I'm not so sure. Traced, to me personally, Traced feels a lot better than Subhash. The point that was made by Bagel on stream is that Subhash is incredibly strong with Brassbug Hive. So he's very similar to Sierra in that respect. He makes Brassbugs, so obviously his synergy with Brassbug Hive is very strong. And if you build a robots-centered deck, you're looking to get Hive in play. Best case scenario, you have 2 Hives in play and then you're really popping off. But that's kind of a Disneyland scenario, isn't it? And I think most of the time, most of your gameplay with Subhash will be without Brassbug Hive in play. Just like like, sadly, most of your Sierra gameplay is without Brass-Buck-play. So really the sort of what you may call the neutral game of these heroes, that's very important. And I think Subhash's neutral game, while it does basically do the same tricks as Trace, like you can put Coppelia in reserve and play her for free, that's extremely strong. You can abuse Haven by playing so many things from reserve. Those are all the same things. But I think neutral game-wise, Subhash is a bit of a step down from Traced. So I think within Axiom, you can definitely say Traced is the best. I would put him in A tier, and then Subhash in B. And Sierra, I don't know. We'll get to her later. So as far as I'm concerned, I would put 3 of these heroes into A and bump Subhash down to B. And I haven't seen much discussion about that in the comments, so I would be very interested to hear if other people are also feeling that way about Subhash and Traced. Myself, I've been looking into building a Subhash deck because I really like the hero, but I have had a bit of trouble. So if anyone has a good competitive Subhash list, send them my way. Now, as for B, the above average tier, we have 3 heroes here, all purple heroes, Afanas, Nevenka, and Lindiv. Now, Afanas seems like a more complicated, more jump through hoops version of Teja or Sigismar. You get your 1 power each turn if you do a certain thing. You can potentially get multiple of these boosts per turn if you do a certain thing, but it is definitely more complicated, more elaborate than just getting the thing. More elaborate than Kojo, than Sigismar. With added upsides, yes. One added upside is, for example, that this boost that Afanas gives you when you cast a spell, you can put it on any character. It doesn't have to be a specific one. And that's a big upside. That really matters. But there is a problem, and you can see that happening in real time if you check out my Afanas video. The problem is that you're depending not only on playing characters like you are with Teja, for example. You're depending on 2 kinds of cards. You want characters, and then you want to play spells to boost your characters. So there's a lot more potential of this plan going wrong. Right? There's an additional component that you depend on that you might not get from your deck, from the random draws that you get off your deck. So the potential of this deck to sort of fall apart because you have an unlucky draw is much higher, structurally much higher. It doesn't depend on deck building or your skill. It's just a structural problem that this kind of deck has to deal with. And yes, Afanas does get some upsides as a sort of reward for dealing with these risks. The boost going on anything, getting potentially multiple boosts a turn. These are strong upsides, and I would definitely say yes, the hero belongs in B. It's definitely good enough for B, but I wouldn't put it any higher. So in that sense, I agree. Another downside with all of these boost strategies is that you're more vulnerable to removal, right? But personally, I don't think that's a very big deal. The removal is not exactly cost efficient in just Beyond the Gates. We'll see how that develops in the future. But, Afanas is a lot of fun to play. It's a very interesting playstyle, very exciting. So even if it might not be an S tier deck, it's a deck that you would do well to play, definitely. Now for Nevenka, this is another interesting placement. In the video, Bagel said that he would put Nevenka higher than Kojo because she has a sort of high roll potential. On average, she will give you the boost, 1 power per turn, but she has that potential of doing, the anchored effect, which is much stronger. I'm not so sure if I agree with that. Myself, I've actually made the opposite observation. I think she's worse than Kojo, or Sigismar for that matter. I would much rather get reliable value that I can calculate and anticipate, but what she gives you is the opposite of that. You don't know whether you'll get the boost or you'll send your character back from the battlefield, which is kind of, you roll a 1 on her hero power, you've lost the game. You can't afford to take that risk. Now, of course, there are pieces that can prevent you from rolling 1s in the game. Yeah, sure. But that's another thing that you depend on having in play. And another thing is, even rolling a 6, which is sort of like the intense high roller payoff that you get for taking this risk of rolling the die, that might not be what you want. There are a lot of situations where you use the hero power, you want the boost because you want to win that side, and then you roll a 6. You've won the jackpot, well congrats, you lose the side because your character is anchored instead of having the boost. So honestly, sometimes, actually a lot of the times, for me, in my experience, it felt like I want 2 to 5. I don't want to roll a 1, I don't want to roll a 6. And that's just not a good deal deal, guys. Now, granted, there are certain upsides. Like with Afanas, you can trigger this whenever you want and on whatever character you want. And those are big upsides. That really helps you with dancing around your opponent with these sorts of tactical decisions. So I wouldn't underestimate that. But still, I think there's a point to be made about this being structurally very unsound for competitive gameplay. I mean, I'm not talking about it being fun. It's a lot of fun. But is it structurally sound? Is it reliable? Is it exploitable? Can you build synergies around it? You know, those are points where I'm not so sure about Nevenka. I would definitely not put her in B. I would say C. And actually, if you want my personal opinion, I would put her in D. Call me a Nevenka hater, but I have yet to find a deck for Nevenka where I really feel like I have control over the outcome of the game. Now, Lindiv, the third hero in the B tier, this is another one that really sparked a lot of discussion in the comments of this VOD. Many people say she surely does not belong in B. Like Gavin Kenny, you know him, Gavkin, from my card rating videos, he said this is D tier for him. Lindiv, it's a cool playstyle. She gets a lot of hype, much like Afanas, because the playstyle looks very cool. You imagine it being a lot of fun. You know, you do lots of things, you sacrifice this, you trigger that, and then you get value. And it's really nice. But honestly, once you've played the deck, it's not that cool. Granted, you know, you get into a lot of situations where you can sacrifice this to trigger that, and then the Maw token becomes a 2/2, and it's crazy. But you're jumping through so many hoops. You're building your entire deck around this sacrifice mechanic. You have Kraken as your top end, Anubis, you have all this stuff that gets better if you sacrifice it, Moonlight Jellyfish, Izmir Stargazer, then you have Kuwait, which is basically your sort of powerhouse. And those are all nice cards, and the synergy is obvious, but in the actual game, you feel like you're jumping through 10 hoops, doing 10 side quests, and doing these 10 optional things that the Teja player or the Waru player doesn't have to care about. And then the payoff you get for it is honestly not that strong. Like the Maw token, which by the way you only get for free every second round, the Maw token becoming a 2/2/2 is not that strong. It's a nice payoff for a sacrifice, but you want more. You need more. I've played Lindiv a couple of times and I've really tried. You know, I wanted to make the sacrifice thing work, and I think it's one of the decks that people are rightfully hyped about because it's so much fun. It's so unique, but at the end it feels like you're satisfying 10 times as many criteria and optional things, and you know, you're jumping through all these hoops to do basically nothing, and then meanwhile Trace just plays one Coppelia for free and wins the game. That's what it feels like. So Lindy, for me as well, I would put her in D tier. Maybe she gets better if there are more sacrifice themed cards in later expansions, but right now she doesn't have as much support as she might want. Okay, we're getting to the highlight of the video, guys. C tier, the average heroes. And the first one is Kojo. Now, I'll try not to be biased, yeah? I would say he's accurately placed. I would say he's pretty much the definition of the average power level hero in Beyond the Gates. I think Sigismar is stronger. The 1/1/1 is stronger than your cat. And the problem for Kojo is what's really holding him back is his ability can't synergize with stuff in your deck. It's not like Lindiv or Afanas where you build your entire deck around this thing that you're trying to do. For Kojo, you just get a guy every second round. There's nothing to it. The guy is not weak enough that you can sacrifice him. It's just a guy. Or a cat in this case. And yes, the 2/2 every second round, it helps you to push for progressions. You know, you get a sort of a spike every second round, and that's strong, but there's no synergy around it. Now, that being said, he's probably still a strong contender for Bravos decks, because the other two Bravos heroes are honestly just as weak, or maybe weaker. But you're not building around Kojo's cat. Your deck isn't built around the Buddha token. And that's a big shortcoming. That's not what you want to see. You want your hero power to be something that really gives your deck a unique flair, that helps you do something that no one else can do. And the cat token is strong, but it's just a cat. So yes, I would agree. Kojo is kind of the archetypical C tier hero. In my heart, he's S, of course, but that's a different matter. Now Arjun, to me, Arjun seems strong. I don't have much experience playing him. He's sort of the other side of Muna compared to Teja. With Teja, you want to play characters that anchor themselves and then they get boosted from Teja. With Arjun, you want the other side. You want to play strong characters that Arjun gets to anchor. Now, his power is expensive though. You tend to run out of fuel for not only his power, but your game plan as a whole. And while Daughter of Yggdrasil still is a very strong fit for him. I think that's the strongest card you can anchor with him. It's not quite on the same level as Coppelia, or what Coppelia is for Trace decks and Sapage decks. I think Arjun does get some sort of uncertainty points, though, for his potential with Lyra Festival. That's something that I haven't looked into. I always thought Rin was the festival hero, but people have been pointing out, if your hero can anchor stuff, that sounds very good for a festival. And I kind of agree. I have to look into it. So Arjun, I think maybe C, maybe low B. He kind of depends on the Muna card pool, and the Muna card pool is strong, strong removal, strong characters. There's no problem with him. He doesn't have a weakness really, except maybe running out of resources. So yeah, seems pretty unclear, and I don't see a lot of discussion about him, so I don't have any idea what other people are saying, but I would personally wager that he's stronger than Kojo and Nevenka at least. So maybe bump him up a bit in this tier list. Now, Gulrang. Gulrang is a personal sleeper pick of mine. The ability is very strong. I was watching some gameplay of Gulrang a while ago, and this was just with the starter decks, or the stuff that was on Exalted at the time, and still Gulrang was absolutely crushing. Now with the full card pool of the first set, it's going to be even stronger. And is it as strong as, playing everything for free with Traced, having a million cards with Traced, your Robin Hood staying in the game for 1,000 turns with Waru? I'm not sure, but it is strong. It's maybe a bit underexplored because the other two Ordis heroes are kind of stealing the show, Waru especially, but Sigismar too. And maybe people are not into this sort of stalling gameplay, this game plan where you just, I'll wait until round 10 and then maybe I'll do something. Personally, I don't see a problem with it. It's probably cool. And, getting into this late game where you overwhelm your opponent with tokens, it feels nice, dude. So yeah, I would push her up. I don't know exactly where. I haven't played her enough, but I'm sure she's strong. I'll brew with her. At least I'm hoping that she can go into B. We'll see. Now, as for Akisha, it's kind of sad. I really like her, but I feel Control, the archetype, the trading card game archetype, is structurally unsound. And especially so, you see that in other games, but especially in Beyond the Gates. Your removal is too expensive. It's too fleeting. That is to say, fleeting in the sense of the ability. You invest too much card advantage into your removal spell. Also, another weakness that she has is that the Izmir character lineup is sort of underpowered. I mean, that's a flavor win. It's perfectly on theme, but it really doesn't help her. It makes it very hard for her to contest expeditions, even when she's always going last. So honestly, from my experience, and I haven't heard anything to the contrary so far, I would put her in D. I don't think she's unplayable, but I think whenever people play her, it's because they like Control, and not because she's strong, sadly. Her ability is cool, she does something unique, but Control is not something you should be playing if you want to win. In Altered right now, in Beyond the Gates, you win with proactive, putting power on the board, and that's not her. Now we're on the lowest tier, the D tier, below average. So this tier is not called unplayable. Bagel called this below average. First one is Basira, and this is another case of people in the comments going, what are you talking, respectfully, what are you talking about? For me personally, Basira being in D is the biggest surprise of this tier list. Apparently for others too. She's regularly played in the Exalts League. There are competitively viable decks for her. People are playing her, and that's not something that can be said about many heroes on this list. So even just by that standard alone, she should be much higher. In terms of competitive play that I've seen, she's definitely the most played of all the Bravos heroes. And she represents a sort of, structurally speaking, she represents an aggro playstyle that is theoretically very well founded. Even if the current card pool of Just Beyond the Gates maybe doesn't let her reach her full potential, but the playstyle that she represents is strong, and she is a good fit for it. That being said, all the things that are being pointed out against her are correct, like, how her ability is not a guaranteed 1/1/1 in power every turn, like with Sigismar and Kojo. The fact that it goes on any target is significant though. The fact that it doesn't have to happen on the first boost that you put out each turn is also significant. It lets you play around things. I agree that on paper she doesn't seem very strong, like you're looking at this, you're comparing her to these other heroes that give you a certain token every round or whatever, and you think about, this has a chance to fail. What if I don't draw a boost? What if I don't have a character to put the boost on? There are these aspects of, things that you're depending on that might fail. Just like with Athanas, it's kind of similar in that way. You want characters on the board, and then you want spells in your hand that boost the character so that you can give them additional boosts, just like with a Thanos. So yes, she seems weak on paper, but the actual results from competitive play, where she's seeing a lot of play, they are hard to argue with. And I have played a little bit of her too, and I think personally she goes into C at least. I would put her in B, honestly. She can hold her own easily against some of these C and D heroes. So yeah, Basira is a B for me, and I think she's the strongest Bravos hero by far. Now, Arak and Kibble, another very interesting playstyle. This is one of those where people are looking at it and their head, starts working it out. And you can see it in their eyes, how the sort of Disneyland scenario in their head unfolds. I will play all these 0 power characters, and then I'll flip the most busted card in Lyra off the top of my deck, Kybora or Asmodeus or whatever. And yeah, if it works, it works. Normally it doesn't work though. And I think if you're looking at this from a serious, competitive perspective, you're aware of that. You're aware that this deck plan is inconsistent. It's highly volatile, and the payoff, it would have to be absolutely game winning. You flip your hit and you win the game. But that's not the case. You flip your Kybora or your Asmodeus and you win that round. But that's maybe not enough. Now other people are saying it's the opposite, dude. Dude, you're just playing a normal deck with an added restriction that some of your characters have 0 in stats, which is normal in Lyra. And then around, turn 5, turn 6, you get a free character. It doesn't matter what character it is. It's a free character. It's such a boost in resources for that round. Your opponent can't keep up with it. So that's a kind of divide that we're seeing with the Rock. Some people are going for this Disneyland flip, an extreme banger. And other people are saying it doesn't matter what character you flip. Just build a normal deck and then you get free characters on the board and you win the game. How it works in practice, I'm not sure. Is it actually good? Is it consistent enough? I would say that probably not. So me personally, I would remain in D tier for Arak, but I know a couple of people who are really supportive of him, who would say this is the thing to play. Maybe not as consistent as Fen, but Arak has been played competitively in matches that I've seen, and people have been experimenting with it, and that's gotta count for something. Now, Sierra, yeah, people probably agree she's completely overshadowed by the other Axiom heroes. Her game plan is straightforward, easy to understand, but there are not enough viable landmarks for her yet. In just the first set, you have a couple, and you have Brazbak Hive, of course, which is her big haymaker. But the fact that it has to be cost 3 or more is a big downside. There are 2 landmarks that you would like to play, but you can't because of this restriction. Overall, you don't have enough gas. You don't have enough playing pieces. Sometimes it pops off, but it's a consistency issue. You can't fill your deck with enough of the pieces that will be good for you in all cases for the deck to actually consistently perform. So yeah, it's hard to argue with her being in D. I'd say it's probably accurate. At least I haven't seen any evidence or heard anyone say anything to the contrary. Rin and Orchid is an interesting case because, yes, the benefits she gives you are very abstract. Abstract in the sense of they don't impact the board. It's not like you're getting boosts on characters, you're getting a token. She's not helping you win. She's not helping you win progressions, progress the board state. She's giving you cards, which is it's instrumental to winning, but it's not winning. And also, it doesn't seem to occur that often in the game, you can probably count it on one hand. How many times did you progress due to Forest in that game? So she's, people are estimating she's gonna draw you like 3 cards a game or something like that. Is that strong enough? Apparently people are saying no. Personally, I think drawing cards is about the strongest thing you can do in the game. And by that logic, all the heroes that do draw you cards should be very strong. Rin and Azadi are the obvious examples, but those don't seem to be very strong in practice. So what's going on there? I think the problem with Rin that many people are seeing is, as I said, she doesn't impact the board at all. So if you're playing her with a traditional game plan of, you're gonna put down characters, you're gonna win expeditions, you're gonna contest your opponent, she's gonna struggle. She doesn't have the tools available to other heroes. She rewards you if you succeed, but she doesn't help you succeed. So I can see her really struggling in a sort of traditional game plan. But that being said, people are really liking Rin as a hero for Lyra Festival. The Muna version of Lyra Festival. It's kind of funny how Lyra Festival is only played in Muna and not in Lyra. But yeah, Rin and Orchid is the primary hero that people are considering for the festival combo. It all depends how good the festival combo is. From what I've heard, it's definitely viable. People are pulling it off consistently. People who've built festival decks, they're saying, you get this to work. It's not just a 1 in a million chance. So I would absolutely push Rin up from D to at least C, potentially B. Now, obviously, with a combo like that, it can't be too strong. It can't be too consistent, because then it would just win all the time and it would be very boring. Yes, of course. So she's probably not A or S, but I would be surprised if she's not B. That being said, I anticipate her to be all about Festival, because Festival plays to her strengths. You draw cards, so you find your combo pieces earlier. She doesn't contest the board, which doesn't matter because you're not contesting the board at all. You don't care about winning progressions. So her sort of the big weakness of her, it doesn't touch you. And the stuff that she gives you helps you do your combo. So yeah, Rin, in my book, looking pretty strong. It's a bit uncertain, of course, but if the Festival combo is good, and it's only going to get better with more cards added in later expansions, then she's good, surely. Now, the last hero, Azadi, there are some people who are really liking him, but it seems like their support of Azadi is more like a reaction to people finding out that he's really bad. And then they come in and say, actually, you're building the deck wrong. Here is what you should do. And he's actually really good, stuff like that. But if you look at Azadi's hero power, on paper, it seems very weak. He's drawing cards, yes. But if you imagine it in your head, how's the game going to go? You're going to ramp. Ideally, you ramp on turn 1, and then on turn 2, you have 5 mana, you can trigger him the first time, and then you play a 6-drop on the next turn and a 7-drop, and you get all these cards and you win everything. Except, first of all, you're depending on perfect draws, right? If you don't draw your ramp, you're delayed. If you don't draw your 5-drop, you have to play the 6-drop first, and then you miss out on 1. There's a lot of stuff that can go wrong, or that can screw up your sequence. And even if you're doing it, you're in a game plan where, yes, you're drawing additional cards, but you're playing one big thing a turn. And that's not going to win you the game. That's going to tie you the game. So yeah, I don't want to stomp Azadi into the ground, but in my experience, if you're going for big red Bravos, which I did in my first video, I would go Kojo instead of Azadi, even though he's meant to be the ramp lord hero. And being perfectly honest, I don't really see him getting better either. If you imagine there's more cards coming into the card pool, that doesn't really make him stronger, does it? It gives him more options for ramp, it gives him more options for big cards, yes, but it doesn't make his thing easier to do, right? So while for a hero like Sierra, I definitely assume that even if she's kind of weak today, she might get stronger. And the same is true for Lindiv as well, definitely. For Azadi, I'm struggling to see that happen. And from what I've heard in, Discord channels and stuff like that, people are struggling with him. Many people are going in and they're thinking, oh, I want to cast Kybora, I want to cast Chenlong. What's a good hero for that? Oh yeah, Azadi, he's about big characters. Okay, and then they try it out and the hero ends up doing very little. So yeah, I would say he belongs in D, which is a shame, kind of. If you want to play big red, play Kojo. So there you have it, guys. Those were my thoughts, or sort of my compiled research results on this tier list. Again, I want to make 2 things clear. First of all, this tier list made by Bagel is very nice. It's a beautiful piece of content, and I'm very thankful for it. I don't mean to push it down or anything. On the contrary, I think he's given us a very interesting piece to talk about, and the discussion that we're seeing in the comments of that VOD is proof to that. And the second thing being, if you want to play Lindiv, if you want to play Azadi or Orak or any of these heroes that are considered weak, go for it. Dude, the game's about being fun. And if somebody wants a tier list of, what should I play? And you say, yeah, play Waru and Mac. Okay, that's them done. They can go off, play their competitive game. They can play in the Exalts League. They can play in a tournament. And you can do that too if you want. But don't neglect this other component of the game, the fun component. And my channel is all about fun. It's not about playing Waru and Mac all day or Traced. It's about the cool stuff. The Orak, the Lindiv, the Goldrang, Acacia. These are all fun archetypes. And the game is much richer for having them. And besides, imagine you pick one of these underplayed heroes that everyone thinks are underperformers, and you come up with a really cool brew. Or you build a deck and you just have the perfect draw and you pull off an insane game. That's such a reward in itself. I would never pass up that opportunity or that chance, the chance for that to happen. So go for it, yeah. Now, what do you think? Do you agree with these placements? Do you agree that Lindiv is D tier, or is the sacrifice actually good? Nevenka being kind of weak, too volatile, Iraq being too weak, Akisha being unplayable because control is too bad. You know, these are takes that I assume many people disagree with, and I encourage you to disagree with them. Tell me in the comments what you think, and I'll try to be back as soon as possible with the next video, probably next part of the card review. We'll see. Maybe some gameplay. I'll try my best. You all have a nice day, and I'll see you next time.